Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at mit Fried und Freude, which translates to with peace and joy. This is a pretty straightforward chorale, a couple of interesting harmonic tidbits in certain places, and I'll talk about them when we get to them, but for all intents and purposes, it's a pretty straightforward analysis. We're just going to hop right into it. So, 1 sharp in the key signature, we start on E minor, we end on E major, so I reckon we're in the key of E minor. However, our first cadence is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor, so we're looking for a point in which we modulate. So starting off with our E minor triad, passing tones in the lower voices before we get G, B, E, and B. That's E minor in first inversion, so we'll just change the figured bass. Passing tones in the lower 3 voices, we get a bit of an A, C, F sharp, and B sonority here, which is kind of like a dominant-ish sound with the, or I guess, I don't know, I'm hearing this kind of like a B dominant in passing, but with the C natural, like the flat 9, but I guess this would technically be like a passing 2 chord with this B suspended in the melody. But regardless, we get an interesting chord here where I think we get 2 accented non-chord tones here. We would instead look at C sharp, E, G, and B, which is C sharp minor 7 flat 5, which would be 7 7 half diminished of 7 actually, because this would be the leading tone to D. This is a very interesting phrase. It's almost like E Dorian in the bass with the natural 6th and the lowered 7th. And then we do go to 7 afterwards, D major, D, F sharp, and A, which is a 7 chord. We typically don't see tonicizations of 7, but I think Bach, you could make the argument that the chorale is in the key of B minor for its entirety, and really if you actually look at it, it might make more sense if you analyze it that way, but this doesn't feel like we start off in the key of B minor. It feels a little disingenuous, even though the pitch collection, if you look at it, is B minor with the F sharp and the C sharp. This feels very strongly on E minor. E minor once, E minor twice, and then we get a tonicization of D major before we get anything B minor related. But I do think this is the common chord from E minor to B minor if we do so choose to analyze it that way. You could analyze this whole section in the key of B minor as well. If you wanted to do that, it would be B minor, this would be 4, this would be 6, and this would be 2, 7 before we went to 3. And you could analyze it that way if you wanted to, but I don't think that this is the case. I feel like really this is the key of E minor. It just feels that way, even though this would be, quasi-modal in the bass. But then we go to C sharp, E. G sharp I think is an accented non-chord tone as well. It's the A sharp we're really looking at, which is A sharp diminished over C sharp, another 7 chord, but in first inversion and diminished, so leading tone 7th rather than subtonic 7th. We then have B sharp, F sharp, B sharp, B, F sharp, B, and D, which is B minor in root position, which is our tonic now. 3-7-1's a pretty normal progression, not the most normal, but we do see it pretty frequently. We then have F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. That's F sharp major, which is our dominant, passing 7th in the alto before we cadence on B minor, our tonic triad, B, D, F sharp, and B. Then we have another phrase in the key of B minor, and we get a perfect authentic cadence, which interestingly enough includes the Picardy third. We cadence on B major here, and it does not function like a dominant, which is very interesting. Typically when we get a Picardy third in the middle of a chorale, or not in the final cadence, we usually see it allied with the key that it's modulating to, where that major chord functions as a dominant. But no, this is just a major tonic, which makes it very interesting. So we have another B minor chord here, B, B, F sharp, and D. That's our tonic triad. And we have some passing tones here. We have A natural, we have C sharp, we have F sharp, and we have C sharp. And we have this juxtaposition of A natural and C sharp here, which is interesting. So we actually have kind of like a passing minor 5 chord here. In first inversion, and I am going to mark that because the chord that follows it is not another tonic triad. It's actually I guess you could consider it a tonic functioning triad, but we have G, D, G, and B, which is our 6th chord, G major. Passing tones in the upper voices, we get this C sharp juxtaposition again, or sorry, no, we have A naturals twice here. We have G, A, B, not G sharp, A sharp, B natural here. So we're getting some interesting juxtaposition here of C sharp happening. Well, actually, C sharp is diatonic to the key of B major, but this kind of looks like a D major fragment here. But we have the G as well as the B, which changes the trajectory from D major to something else. In this case, we have F sharp, G, B, and D, which could kind of look at like a 4-2 chord, like G major 7 in 3rd inversion, which would be 4-2. But I think this F sharp is actually a non-chord tone. It does resolve down by step coincidentally, but I really do think this is an E minor 7 chord, E, G, B, and D, which would be 4-7 in the key of B minor. We then have F sharp, C sharp, B, and C sharp, and as we are getting ready for our cadence here, this B is an accented non-chord tone. This D and this B, those are both non-chord tones as well, and I do think 5 is being implied here. That does fully resolve on the next beat, F, E, A sharp, C sharp, which is 5-7, so we'll just have the figured bass reflect that. And then we cadence not on B minor, but B major, like I said earlier, B, D sharp, F sharp, and B. And we continue in the key of B minor until we modulate somewhere in the middle here, so we can get ready for our perfect authentic cadence in the key of E minor. So there's some type of modulation occurring, and I think it happens somewhere in here. Even though we don't get D sharp until here, it really feels like it starts to modulate in and around these 3 beats, from the end of the last measure of the first system to like beat 2 of the first measure of the second system. But regardless, we're in B minor for now. We have F sharp, C sharp, E, and C sharp, which is an incomplete F7 chord. It has no 3rd, which is very interesting. This is just 7 with a 5. Makes me feel like there's a typo there or something, because it's kind of interesting that we get this doubling of the 5th without the 3rd. But I didn't write it, Bach wrote it, so it's just an interesting little tidbit. Then we have B minor, B, B, F sharp, and D, which is our tonic triad. Passing tone in the alto, A, E, A, and C sharp. That's A major in root position. That would be our subtonic 7th chord, which sometimes people call 5 of 3, depending on how you look at it. And then we have a passing 7th in the bass as well, before we get F sharp, D, A, and D, which is our 3 chord D major in 1st inversion. So we do have 7 going to 3. They're more or less the same thing, but I've seen them analyzed both ways, and I want to stay consistent with the analysis, especially when it functions that way. So I think both analyses are correct, because we would expect a 7 chord to typically be a leading tone 7th. It's the more common flavor of 7th chord we get in minor keys especially. But then we get G, D, G, and B. So 3 goes, we have like a cycle of falling 5ths here, starting on, I guess, 7, 7, 3, 6, which is where we would expect it to go. G major is our 6th chord in the key of B minor. We have a passing 7th in the bass, and I also, in the alto, and I also think this is the point in which we modulate to the key of E minor via the 3 chord. Notice how our modulations have both occurred with the 3 chord as the pivot chord. Maybe that's just a coincidence, but I think it does strengthen the analysis. The fact that we do see common chords being the same chord in each respective key. So we have the median being the pivot chord in both modulations. I think that is, I think it's a little bit more than a coincidence, but it could be a coincidence. This does happen to be the scheme that Bach uses in a lot of his chorales, however. But then we go to, we're in the key of E minor now, so we're now analyzing in terms of E minor. We have C, C, E, and A. Remember, not C sharp anymore, but C natural. That's A minor over C, which is 4-6. That's our subdominant. Passing tone in the bass before we get E, B, E, and G, which is our tonic triad. When we have 4, 6 going to 1, notice how we have the leading tone connecting the bass notes. Sometimes we even get a fully voiced 7th chord with other supported voices moving at the same time, but here we get the leading tone, which is typically the bare minimum. And actually, to be more specific, this actually isn't even the leading tone. This is just a natural 7th, which has been a recurring theme in this chorale. We have D natural here, which takes us to the key of B minor, rather than insinuating E minor, because D sharp would be like continuing this in a melodic minor fashion, but no, it's D natural. And we have a bunch of subtonic 7ths. We have a 7th here, 7th here, and I think we have one later as well. I might be making that up. No, I'm definitely making that up, but the fact that the subtonic 7th plays a role in the first half of the chorale seems significant to me. Regardless, we have A, C, E, and A on the next beat. That's A minor in root position, which is a 4 chord. B, B, D sharp, and F. That's B major, which is our dominant, passing 7th in the tenor, and then we cadence on E minor, E, G, B, and E, which is our tonic triad. 4, 5, 1 doesn't get more cadential than that. Okay, looking ahead, we have a short phrase, very short, that ends in an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor. So we're looking for a point on which we modulate, and I don't think we do it right away because we have D sharp going to E here, and you could make the argument that this whole phrase is in the key of B minor. You could analyze it in terms of B minor, but I think this leading tone, we have no reason to think that we're in the key of B minor until we hear B minor ideas, and that doesn't happen until closer to the cadence. So we have G, B, E, and B. That's E minor over G, so we'll just change the figured bass. We then have D sharp, B, F sharp, and B. That is B major over D sharp. That's 5, 6. Delayed 7th or passing 7th in the melody before we get E minor, E, B, E, and G, which is our tonic triad, and also what I believe to be our pivot chord to the key of B minor. In this case, it is a 4 chord, not a 3 chord like earlier. That'd be cool if it was, but it isn't. Passing 7th in the bass and passing tone in the melody. Then we get C sharp, A sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, C sharp, A sharp, and E sharp. That's A sharp diminished in root position. That's just 7. 4 wants to go to 7, and one of the places 7 wants to go is 1, which is where it goes. B, F sharp, B, and D. Tonic triad, B minor. And looking ahead, we actually have our moving us back to the key of B minor via G major, which we modulate relatively quickly to in the key, or at least what I believe to be relatively quick. Starting in and around the beginning of the phrase, we have a imperfect authentic cadence in the key of G major. So this B minor triad goes to G major, G, G, B, G, G, D, and B, which is our 6th chord in the key of B minor. You could say that this is our tonic in the key of G major. You could even analyze this as a direct modulation. It did sound rather direct to me, but I ultimately decided to use a common chord because I could, and the analysis makes sense. And I wasn't 100% convinced. I was like 80%, but not fully there. And after listening to it to a bunch of times, because all of the modulations up until this point have been common chord, why not also analyze this one as a common chord? But I do think a direct modulation is suitable for this analysis as well. We have C, G, E, and G. That's C major in root position. That's a 4 chord. Passing tones in the inner voices, A and F sharp. And then we have B, B, G, and D, which is G major in first inversion. That's 1, 6. We then have E minor, E, B, G, and B. We're seeing this voicing of root 2/5 and a third quite a bit in this particular phrase. Passing 7th in the bass, passing tone in the alto before you get C, D, F sharp, and A. That's 5, 4, 2. This is a pretty interesting progression here. Even throughout all the counterpoint, we have a logical, functionally harmonic progression. Neighbor tone in the bass, the start of a suspension in the alto, and a neighbor tone in the melody spells G major over B, B, D, G, and G, which would be 1, 6. That's where 5, 4, 2 would go. We then go up to C, E, G, and A. That's A minor 7 over C, which is 2-6-5. Bach loves his 2-6-5 chords. And then we have B, D, 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 F sharp, and A, which is D major in root position, which is a 5 chord. And then we cadence on G major, G, D, G, and B, which is our tonic triad. So even throughout all of the counterpoint that's going on, Bach was able to retain a functionally harmonic progression with all of the proper resolutions and everything. So very impressive to see the harmonic rhythm subdivided consistently for 3 beats and still have an interesting progression with an intact cadence and everything. But looking ahead to our last phrase, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E minor, and we're looking for a point in which we modulate, and I don't think we have any reason to modulate until we start to see D sharp, so maybe in and around these 2 beats, we'll see. We get A, C, F sharp, and A. That is F sharp diminished over A, which is 7-6, passing 7th in the alto before we get B, D, D, and G. Sorry, B, B, D, and G. That's G major in first inversion, 1-7-6-1 or 1-6-7-6-1. Those are very common progression in Bach's music. We see the tonic triad traversed or inverted over the span of 2 beats or 3 beats via a passing dominant chord, and most of the time it's a first inversion 7 chord. This is a pretty common progression. Passing tone in the tenor before we get C, G, C, and F sharp. This F sharp is an accented non-chord tone, and it's really this E we're looking at. This is C major in root position. It's a 4 chord. And then we get G, G, B, and D, which is our tonic triad, with some passing tones in the lower voices. We then have E minor, E, B, E, and G, which is a 6 chord. I think this is where we go back to the key of E minor via our tonic. You could make the argument that we start as early as C major. You could say 6-3-1, but we did see a 6-3-1 progression yesterday, but it was a very static progression and a byproduct of different circumstances. But here it doesn't really sound like we modulate until the end of the phrase, or towards the end of the phrase anyways, so I think we're in the key of E minor towards the latter half. That's just how it sounds to me. We then have A, C, D sharp, and F sharp, which is D sharp fully diminished 7th. That would be 7-4-3 in the key of E minor. This C is a chord tone. This E is not a chord tone. Neither is this E. And then we get B, F sharp, E, and F sharp, which is implying a B major chord, but we have a 4-3 suspension over the bass. It gets resolved on the and of beat 2 before we cadence on E major, E, G sharp, B, and E, which is our tonic triad in root position. And it's major, of course, because it's the end of a minor chorale, because most minor chorales end with a major cadence. I imagine Bach does that because he wants to end on an uplifting note, and usually the chorale is the last movement of the cantata, if it is a movement of a cantata, which the vast majority of them are. But that is today's analysis. All in all, pretty straightforward. I'd say probably the shakiest parts of the analysis are the beginning. Actually, the first system is a little shaky in and around the modulations and how the chord progressions are analyzed. But the 7-7 of 7 is very interesting. I don't know if this is just modal and I should analyze it modally, but it's interesting to have the C sharp and the D natural juxtaposed with one another in the context of what I'm calling E minor. But regardless, pretty straightforward analysis. It's nice to have a refreshing analysis that's not super difficult after a long day. This is a very beautiful chorale as well. Interesting little modal injections here and there, at least in terms of how it hit my ear. So it's interesting that Bach still makes use of that vocabulary. But on that note, thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. If you're interested in following me along on this journey, feel free to subscribe and hit the notification icon. I upload once a day, and if you'd like your daily dose of analysis or your daily dose of Bach, you'll have a video delivered to your front page if you are notified about them. So please do consider if you'd like to follow along, and if not, that's okay. I appreciate you watching the videos, and hopefully you get more enjoyment from videos that I post in the future. But on that note, again, thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.